Hi, everybody. This is Brian with Abracadoodle.
And I'm Kevin.
This is week 8 of our Weekly Artist Challenge, our second week in a row where we've had a special guest, and we're really excited to have Ben Florsheim, Mayor of Middletown, here with us. He will be discussing with us shortly some things that he wanted to talk to us about. But in the meantime, we're going to start, like we always do, with a little bit about our special artists. So this week we have, I think, kind of an underappreciated artist. So you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, Paul Klee. Paul Klee was a Swiss-German artist. He actually was born as a Swiss. He actually didn't have residence or citizenship, rather, until after his death. But he was born there. And so he considered himself often a German artist. He was interested in music and drawing from when he was a child. His parents were actually both musicians. And you were telling me earlier, one was a music teacher. Was that his dad?
His dad was a music teacher and his mom was a singer.
His mom was a singer. So he really had a music background. So he liked to incorporate music a lot into his art.
And he played the violin.
And what I think is interesting about a lot of musicians is I find that they're really structured. And that was not terribly different with Paul Klee. His mother, incidentally, gave him a box of sidewalk chalk when he was 8 years old, and that was formative for him. And so he started doodling with that, like many of us do when we had sidewalk chalk when we were little. And he said he struggled with color all his life, but he was a real student of art, and he really looked to improve himself. He was his own worst critic. So he got better. He studied. He saw Van Gogh's work in person and met Van Gogh. He said he was in awe of it. And growing up in Germany and Switzerland at the time, expressionism was really starting to get popular. And he used this method to distort things. And it really, I think, helped him with his color as well, because expressionism, and Kevin will correct me if I'm wrong, is they get to distort things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily using bright colors like pop art, but by distorting things. So let's take a little look into some of his examples of his work. And you'll see he used patterns a lot and shapes and boxes. He loved triangles. He loved squares and rectangles. This one here is really the one that's inspiring our splat doodle this week. And you can see he used a lot. I mean, there's a lot of detail here. Today, we're not going to necessarily go into this much detail because we don't have time to create something this crazy.
It's a little overwhelming.
It is a little overwhelming. Here's another one using a lot of circles and squares. And Kevin really liked this one. Tell me about this one.
This one's Red Balloon, and I think it's interesting because when you look at pretty much anything that he did, I mean, I know there's a lot going on in it, but if you just look at it, it is more or less just a collage of geometric shapes, like squares, there's triangles, rectangles, and a circle. And then because he was so obsessed over color and experimenting with it, even though he used a lot of bright colors, he did like washes over them to mute them, to dull them down. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, he was really a student of color. And you'll see here behind us, we have a couple of examples. This is Kevin's advanced version of what he did. And you'll see he did a bunch of cutouts and then did a watercolor wash over it. And I simply did collage. I just cut out a bunch of shapes, stuck them onto each other. And I got really, really involved with how Kevin was making fun of me because I took it so seriously.
Yeah.
With how particular it was, because I wanted it to kind of represent the structure that Paul Klee clearly had in his work. So before we get more into that, I would very much like to introduce Mayor Florsheim. Mayor Florsheim, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Brian and Kevin, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We are so excited to have Abracadoodle in Middletown and in Central Connecticut. And I'm really excited to be here. This is a great way to spend part of my Monday as we get back into the swing of things. This is just such an important thing for us to be talking about right now. Is creative pursuits, is education, is art. And we were talking before we started recording here. Brian asked me if I had any art experience. I don't really have any. I was in art class in school, like everybody else. But a lot of my creative work has been doing writing, and I was mentioned that Brian mentioned that he's a performer, and I did some theater related stuff. But visual arts were never something I was particularly drawn to or good at. But at the same time, I really have a lot of appreciation for the visual arts. I think that beauty is just so important to the world, and art is so important to the world. And I say that in my role that I play now as mayor of Middletown. Beauty is such an important part of communities. Having beautiful spaces, having spaces that celebrate and uplift art in communities is one of the things that makes strong communities. One of the things that makes places like Middletown exciting for people to live in. And I remember during my campaign for mayor last year, one of the things that I heard about more than anything else, kind of amazingly, was a desire for more arts programming, a desire for more funding from the city to support you, whether it's kids classes and camps and things like that, public art installations, and taking advantage more of some of the assets that we have in Middletown. We have a lot of arts in our downtown. We have a lot of arts coming out of places like Wesleyan and Middlesex Community College, and we have a great arts program in our schools. We need to be doing more to uplift those things, and Abracadoodle is certainly one part of that puzzle. And I'm excited because, like I said, I'm no scholar of the visual arts, but I did grow up with lots of Paul Klee coffee table books in my house. My dad was a big fan of his, and I think that he's just right. He shows what can be done with simple colors and simple shapes to create something that is sort of more than the sum of its parts. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm excited.
Oh, awesome. Really appreciate that. Well, actually, interestingly, one of the things you said about art programs is one of the reasons Abracadoodle exists is, we really believe in standard-based art programs and adding on to what is already happening in schools. Mm-hmm. And, we're really proud to have had a number of people involved who are experts in the education field write our curriculum. So, which we're really proud of. But more importantly, for you, what I wanted to find out is, you mentioned art class. Was there something in art class that you remember being particularly impactful for you?
Geez, I remember taking a summer class. I didn't have, it's actually, I can make a plug here for something else that's going on this week. Because I remember, I never felt like that was my forte, right? In school, I was okay at math up until the more advanced levels. I was pretty good at reading and writing and that sort of thing. But art class, I always struggled a little bit to sort of connect with with what we were doing. But I had a teacher in fourth grade, I think it was, who I really resonated with, and I loved this art teacher because she just brought so much enthusiasm to it. She was so willing to sort of cultivate everybody's different talents. And I wanted to take, she was offering a summer class, and I said to my parents, I want to take this summer class because I was just drawn to how she was sort of bringing things out in me and in all of my friends. And the reason I didn't plan to talk about that, but today is the first day of National Teacher Appreciation Week.
Right.
So I wanted to just say that so much difference can be made by the environment and by the person who is teaching you a subject. And I know that I'm sure that many of the students following along feel that way about this program. And so that was sort of a foot in the door. And I think that what I learned to appreciate through that summer class was it doesn't have to be as complexity is not the same thing as excellence, you know.
Exactly.
And you know, I think that where I struggled with trying to make, you know, to try to draw a hand that looked like a hand, or draw a person that looked like a person, or a tree that looked like a real tree, you know, I would get bogged down in those details. And I really appreciate when people are able to do, you know, render a sort of a photographic, you know, meticulously detailed picture of something. But that was never going to be, you know, I like to get into the details on policy and things like that. But I can't really do that when I'm trying to create something visually. But what I learned to appreciate, I guess, is sort of what I alluded to earlier, is that there's beauty in simplicity too. And I think that has always been kind of the aesthetic that I've personally preferred, and that's where I can, you know, maybe get by, maybe sort of do something passable when it comes to doing my own work, or at least I'll give that a shot today.
All right. So with all that in mind, you want to give this a try?
Let's give it a try. I've got some. I don't have cutouts. I have some blank paper and some markers, and I'm going to try to do some shapes and stuff like that here.
Awesome. You know, so we were inspired by the fact that the artists that we studied started off with sidewalk chalk.
Yeah.
So we have black pieces of paper, and we have oil pastels, which can mimic that look of sidewalk chalk. So we're going to try that for a little bit. And then we're just going to use some basic shapes and try to create something fun. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
All right, let's give it a go. All right, let's see. And while we're doing this, if you don't mind, we can talk a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you have to add? Oh, yeah. So we wanted to give you this opportunity. I know this is a really crazy time for kids in Middletown, and particularly, you know, for those who might really be used to the social aspect of being a kid these days.
Yeah.
And I was curious, did you have anything that you wanted to say to the kids in Middletown or surrounding areas about this time?
Well, I mean, I think that the biggest thing I would try to relay to anybody who's watching is that this has been an incredibly challenging and difficult time for everyone.
Yeah,
and I think that we're you know, I remember being a kid, and I'm still, you know, I'm on the younger side when it comes to elected officials and mayors, and I remember that a big part of being a kid was feeling like eventually, you know, you might not kind of know how things work, but being a kid is about learning how things work, and then eventually you'll sort of get to a point where you're grown up, and then you'll know how things work, and you'll have things figured out, and things will seem to sort of make sense a little bit more. And what I think we're seeing happen in this moment of crisis, of this pandemic, that everybody is struggling to figure things out, and that we're all kind of, sometimes it feels like we're just kind of in midair, and we don't know which direction is up or down, or forward or backward. And that's a scary thing. It's a scary thing when you are used to things happening a certain way, and then you have to get used to them happening in a totally new way. And I know how hard it is also to, you know, if we're coming up now on the end of the school year, and I was just talking about teacher appreciation, and I do appreciate that all of our teachers in Middletown and elsewhere are doing amazing work to bring our learning online and do things digitally. But I also know that, you know, if you were sort of just getting into the groove in one of your classes and starting to figure things out, or maybe you had just made a new friend, or you know, you met somebody that you really liked, and now you don't get to see them anymore in person. All that is so hard. All that is so tough, and I really feel for you, because we're all going through our own versions of that. And what I would say is just to hang in there as much as you can. You know, for your sake, for your parents' sake, for your teachers' sake. We're all in this together, and we are all going to play a role in how it ends and how it comes back together. So, I think just remember that everything that we're trying to do is to try to keep each other healthy, to keep ourselves healthy as individuals, and to keep our community healthy. I'm so grateful for people like you, Brian and Kevin, and all the other teachers and people who are keeping our community alive, keeping things like this alive, even when we have to do it online, even though we have to do it not in person anymore. Eventually, we will be able to do it in person, and as we all try to figure this out, I think that patience is important, and I think that knowing that maybe we don't know what the solution is going to look like, but we are going to have one if we work on it together. That's what I think. That's what's getting me through every day, and I think that being a young person, being a student in this day and age, can be especially challenging, but also there's some opportunities that are going to come out of it, I think. So I hope. I
agree. I mean, as a performing artist, I turn to a lot of community theater, or not community theater, but Broadway shows.
Sure.
And one of the things that I immediately thought of was, to quote a Broadway musical, "It's only for now."
That's right.
This isn't going to last forever.
Yep.
And we're not alone.
This too shall pass. Right. And we're not alone. That's so important, is knowing that there's everybody is experiencing it together, and everybody is sort of experiencing that uncertainty and not knowing this of it together, which that's scary, but there's also, it reminds us of what this is really all about, that we all have to be in it together, whether good times or bad. The more that we can do as a community, as a species, looking out for one another, the better we're going to do.
I completely agree. And we thank you all for your leadership too, and what you've done. And by doing little things like this, I think even just coming on with us, even though I know you have a very busy schedule, it's, I think, amazing. And it shows people that, everybody's kind of in this together and everybody's in the same boat. How's your artwork coming?
It's coming. I'm just really getting started. I was sort of, I couldn't really, I realized I'm bad at multitasking, but now I'm sort of in the groove. So I've got my second color coming along here.
That's okay. That's all right. And I tell kids in our class, it's not like it has to be finished all at once. If you're not feeling it right now and you can't finish it, this is a little bit more involved of a project than some of our other ones. So, if it can't all be finished right now, it's not like it's the end of the world.
There was a picture that I did when I was a kid. I still really like birds. I like bird watching, and I loved birds when I was a little kid. I did a drawing. It was just a bunch of different birds. I think it was a watercolor, actually. But it was, for whatever reason, it didn't get finished. There was a few birds that were half colored in. And my dad had it framed, and it's still hanging up in his house. And I was so puzzled by that when I was little, because I was like, I didn't think it was I wasn't really proud of it. It was not finished, and but he really liked it, and he hung it up, and so it's still there. It's hanging up in the house, and there's a bunch of half-finished birds. And I've come to just sort of appreciate that, that everything is unfinished,
Oh yeah.
Everything that we do, there will always be a next stage to it. And so that sort of, I really appreciate it's a tough thing to accept, but once you're able to accept that, there's an impermanence to everything, but there's also sort of an unfinished nature to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It can be liberating. It helps you do the things that you can do. And helps you, it frees you up to try new things when you accept that maybe you don't have to do it perfectly every time.
I get a giggle a little bit out of how Paul Klee would look at what I'm doing right now, just sort of grabbing colors and doing whatever I feel like. And this is a guy who wrote books on color.
Right.
And here I am I'm not really, I don't think I'm doing a very good job patterning. He would, I think, both be like, oh my gosh, this is my week with the artist challenge, but also be at the same time, hey, at least they're creating. And from
That's
creating, from creating comes some learning.
That's right.
He did sound a little OCD.
Oh yeah, like a lot of musicians. I mean, a lot of musicians are very much, I mentioned that before, are very much particular about where everything goes. And I really see that come through in his art, which is why I was so stressed out about creating a sample for this week, because you could just see the OCD coming through in his paintings. I have a daughter I have two daughters. One is kind of head first into everything. She just jumps headlong. And then I have another one who has that OCD quality.
Yeah.
And whenever they do artwork, I just love it, because I get one that's really particular, and I get one that's, okay, I just threw a bunch of colors on, I'm done. But I get a giggle at what he would think of this. All right, I think I'm going to stop there, Kevin. What do you think?
Yeah, talk about it.
All right, so you know what? I'm going to change the view here, and I'm going to show us rather than the overhead. So I've got, I just threw a bunch of shapes in. I bisected a lot of the boxes. The center column is kind of like his castle. His castle was much more detailed, but he had a bunch of shapes. And then a triangle on top, and then a circle, which I think was supposed to be like a sun or something.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is just really loosely patterned. I bisected a bunch of the boxes and threw a whole bunch of color on this. If I had more time, I might have muted them a little bit, because he liked to use color. But again, we're not looking to create a perfect replica of one of his works. And Kevin wants to talk about his a little bit.
Yeah, this is the one that I did last night, and basically what I did was I just cut out a bunch of geometric shapes, and he also had a piece that featured kind of like a figure, because a lot of his work did feature like the human figures, or like human figures, and so he did this one of a angry looking lady, so I liked that, and so I kind of put in my own angry looking lady. And since he liked to mute his colors, all I did was then I took black watercolor paint and just did a wash over it.
Listen to you, Toss, sounding all technical and showing us all up.
You were really distressed last night.
I was. And it's funny, as I tell our students all the time, don't be stressed out.
Just have fun with it. I told you, have fun with it.
Exactly. And so, we did. And today I just threw it a little bit more. So I'd say the same thing to you, Mr. Mayor, is relax a little.
Yeah, exactly.
I could see you getting a little stressed too.
I was trying to get all of it. I started with just some squares and I figured I would do some triangles, and I was trying to get, the image. I was trying to get it filled in a little bit more, and without using up all the ink in these highlighters. But but yeah, I mean, I like the sort of muted colors that came in here, this sort of teal green. But then obviously you've got the highlighter orange, and so I had to sort of jump in with that. But yeah, I'll work on filling up the blank spaces, and we'll see what we end up with.
Oh my gosh, I love actually that you used highlighters, because
that's super fun.
Right? Because that's totally what we're saying. Hey, whatever you got at home,
whatever you have, that's right. Yeah, you don't have to. You don't need the 120 piece set in order to create something.
Because most everybody doesn't, I used oil pastels. Most people don't have those just sitting around at home.
Right.
But, I just wanted to mimic the sidewalk chalk. But it's fun, to be able to do, a lot of the artists that we feature were either sick at home or stuck inside during some of their biggest creative renaissances.
Mm-hmm.
And it created some beauty you know, and some
Yeah.
really cool work. And so here we are doing the same thing. So if you get a chance, I would love it if you send over what you have, and
Absolutely.
we'd be so psyched to post it. And once again, we really appreciate you coming on.
Of course. No, thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'm honored to be invited, and hopefully we can do something again sometime. Maybe even once we're done with this sort of phase that we're in, and we can do something together in person. That would be great.
Oh, absolutely. And before we go, any closing thoughts to either the kids or the adults in Middletown or elsewhere?
Well, I will just say first, thank you. You know, I know how hard it is to ask people to sort of totally upend their lives, and even though it's starting to see, we're getting used to a new version of reality, but we think things are going to change again, and we'll have to get used to it again. And everybody who is playing a part in that, you know, even when it's hard to feel like you're doing something when what you're being asked to do is as little as possible. You know, when we're asking you to stay home, it's hard to feel like you're making the difference, but you are making the difference. You know, all the research is showing us that that what we're doing is saving lives, and so I just want to say thank you first of all for that, and to everybody who is a part of this. You know, it is just so exciting that as Brian, you were saying, that you're using this as sort of an opportunity to reconnect with maybe a creative impulse that maybe you didn't have before, or maybe was sort of missing before, and you maybe lost touch with it. That is just such a cool thing, and
Absolutely.
and that is the exact type of thing we want to see more of in this community. And I'm looking forward to working with you guys to try to make that happen.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you once again. We'll let you get off to your really busy day. And thank you again for what all you're doing.
Absolutely. Looking forward to doing it again sometime.
All right, wonderful. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.